The clock struck 6 p.m. on August 6, 2005. It was a busy Friday in downtown Fortaleza, Brazil. The bustling street of Avenida Dom Manuel was packed with people rushing home to take a shower before starting their weekend in the beach huts along the coast. In the middle of all the honking and traffic of a packed corner, little did they know that 13 feet below the ground, one of the greatest heists in history was already in progress. Welcome to Lore, and this is how 25 criminals pulled off the impossible. In other words, the Banco Central job. On the first day of the robbery, the burglars managed to disable the bank's internal alarms and sensors, allowing them to spend an entire weekend in the bank, and the burglary remained undiscovered until the bank opened for business the following Monday. When the bank employees found out what had happened the following week, the criminals were already headed in different directions throughout Brazil in 11 cars, and the details that emerged shocked the nation. A bank spokesperson stated that the money was uninsured because they thought of the odds of it being stolen were too low to pay for insurance. The heist itself was planned with extreme detail. 3 months earlier, the criminals rented a commercial property in the center of the city and advertised themselves as a landscaping company called Synthetic Grass that sells both natural and artificial grass. To avoid suspicion, the robbers purchased a white van left outside their house with the logo of their fake gardening company on its side. Later, when people were asked about it, they remembered that they didn't pay much attention to the new store, van, or the trucks that brought in and took out dirt for several weeks. At the same time, construction began on an 80-meter tunnel 13 feet deep which ran from a bedroom at the rear of the house, went through the regional stock exchange and into the basement of the bank. From the building of the regional stock exchange, it was just a block away from the bank. The tunnel itself was an example of a master engineer's work, 28 inches in diameter, reinforced with wooden beams, ladders and plastic lining. Electric lights were used to illuminate the passage. A tube attached to an air conditioning unit was used for ventilation as the criminals crept towards the deposit's 2-meter thick concrete floor undetected. Bank employees found a circular hole in the floor of the vault, and cans of energy drinks and cartons of fruit juice were scattered on the floor. All these intel rings a bell in me. I watched it somewhere before, but where? Of course, in the extremely popular Spanish drama called Money Heist. I feel this robbery should have been like a starting point for Alex Pina, the director of the series, to get inspired. The total amount stolen from the Banco Central Bank was 165 million Brazilian reals, that translates to roughly $70 million, all in 50 real bills. Stacked up together, they would have reached 108 feet and collectively weighed around 3.5 tons. So it would have been a huge task to transport the money through the 260 feet long tunnel that led from the hole cut in the ceramic floor of the bank's basement, under the street and into the back of their hideout, which was a block away. It is as if they thought of everything. But there should have been something the robbers overlooked, and thereby making potential mistakes, giving leads for the police to progress forward. Outside the bank, police would later find a large amount of white powder, which was chalk used by robbers to cover their fingerprints. However, the fingerprint of one of the heist crew was found. The second mistake, a member of the gang bought 10 cars at once the next day, paying cash and raising red flags in this poor region of Brazil. Improbably, the police managed to catch up with the trailer carrying those cars in another state, and inside 3 of the vehicles were bundles of 50 real bills. As with most heists, they had an inside man, a bank employee who had tipped them off to the location of motion sensors, alarms and the fact that the cameras filmed but did not record. And the biggest shock, the mayor of Boa Viagem, which is an isolated town south of Fortaleza, was also involved in it, and had funded some of the money to build the tunnel, making the town an attractive safe spot for many of the suspects. 3 dozen of them were accused and 26 ended up in jail for 133 crimes. Armadillo, nicknamed for his digging skills, was caught at his favorite bakery in Sao Paulo and sentenced to 17 years, later reduced to 2. The guy named Big Boss, or the tunnel's engineer, escaped prison in 2011 and is still on the run. But things may have turned out best for those stuck inside prison. Luis Fernando, who's known to be the mastermind behind this job, was caught, held captive, and the kidnappers demanded nearly 900,000 reals from his family as ransom. And though the amount was paid, he was killed. He was shot 7 times, and there were handcuff marks on his wrists and other signs that indicated police officers were involved in the kidnapping and killing. Antonio Reginaldo, who police believed had become a narco-trafficking kingpin of a Sao Paulo neighborhood, escaped jail in 2014 but was recaptured a year later driving a car stocked with cocaine and cell phones. Despite attempts by the authorities to catch those involved, only 8 out of the 25 suspected participants were captured, and almost $9 million of the stolen $70 million were recovered, and the remaining is unaccounted for. According to Antonio Silso dos Santos, who's the police chief in charge of the investigation, there's no way to recover more of the money now that so much time has passed. The criminals behind the heist were smart enough in choosing a location that wasn't in any way the headquarters or a central branch of the country's main bank. However, because it was the central bank, it was bound to have a lot of cash. Another thing that worked in their favor was that the cash stored in the bank was not serialized in order, and so it was nearly impossible to trace. It is important to remember that this was over 15 years ago, and the level of sophistication of digital networks, security, and overall technology was much lower than it is today. Despite the time in which it happened, it is safe to say that the Banco Central heist is one of the most remarkable robberies of all time. Thank you for watching.